Since I was a kid, I've been fascinated by stories. Not just the what, but the how. How lives change. How moments unfold. I realize the answers, they aren't always in books, but they're with people too. That's why we started this show, to uncover the extraordinary in the everyday, one story at a time. Welcome to ACTV Storytellers. This is our third episode, and this is a show where we chronicle the lives of significant Anderson County citizens who've made meaningful and lasting impacts on other folks. And tonight on the Storyteller stage, we have Mr. Sam Turner, who is probably one of the most accomplished and decorated athletes in Anderson County. However, before I start the interview, Sam, I'm going to tell you a story about how I met you. Years ago, I was doing PA at Clinton High School basketball games, and they did like a Dragon of the Week or of the game or something. And I was announcing this game, and somebody came up behind me and handed me this piece of paper and said, "This is the Dragon of the game. Read this." And so I started reading through it, and it was just like accomplishment after accomplishment after accomplishment on the world athletic track and field stage. And I remember it was Eric Schneider and E.T. Stamey, and I turned around and looked at both of them and I said, who is this guy? And they were like, "Oh, he's standing right over there." So that was the first time I met you. I read a part of your bio on a piece of paper, and I was like, holy cow, there's somebody with all these accomplishments living in Clinton.
Right.
So I cannot wait for Anderson County to hear your story.
Well, that was the life I had before moving to Clinton. And, it was a fulfilling life. And now my life as a store manager, that's what I consider myself as a store manager now. Because, when you're growing up and you're pursuing an athletic career, you realize that you're not going to be able to pursue that your whole entire life. So you prepare yourself for your future. So basically, I that was something I achieved at a younger age, and very proud that I've achieved that. But my success as a store manager is what I really hang my hat on.
Brains last longer than knees, don't they?
Yes.
Well, let's just start. I know it may surprise some folks, but talk about, you didn't grow up in Clinton. You grew up in a farther more sophisticated place than Clinton, Tennessee. Talk about your childhood in L.A. and what growing up in Southern California, what that was like for you.
Well, I grew up in South Central Los Angeles. I grew up in Compton. Compton is known for rapping. You got Snoop Dogg, Eazy-E, Suge Knight. There was a lot of that influence going on during that time. And then, of course, there was a lot of gang violence. So growing up, I knew as a young man that if I didn't get involved in sports, I was going to end up in some type of gang affiliations of some sort. And being an athlete got you a get out of jail free card. Pretty much, if you were an athlete, the gangs didn't bother you because you were looked at as a good athlete, and so that kept you out of trouble.
Now, when you were growing up there was you had some pretty important kids that were in your neighborhood.
Yes.
That you played ball with, athletics. Who were some of those folks?
When I was in high school, I had both Eddie and Richard Murray. They were both baseball players.
Hall of Famer for the Orioles. 500 home runs, 3,000 hits.
Yeah. And as a kid, Muhammad Ali would come and visit the Bingham family that lived on my block. Howard Bingham was his personal photographer. So he would come and play football with us out in the street. So, all we knew was we were surrounded by just a plethora of good athletes. Mm-hmm. So, to run around in that crowd, you had to develop your skills at some particular point in time.
I would say so,
and so in my crowd, it was mostly football, baseball, and basketball. I chose track.
Right. Right. Well, how did the environment of Los Angeles and your experiences there, how did that shape who you were?
I knew firsthand that if I didn't get out of the gang environment, if I didn't find something either academically or athletically, that I would succumb to probably some of the situations that happened to some of my relatives and close friends, getting involved just because, being a victim of the environment that you're in. So I chose to stay in the athletic circle, which paid off for me in the long term.
Right. So, how did athletics become a major part of your life? I mean, how did you develop that love and that interest for that? Did you just inherently realize you were a good athlete, or did somebody coach you? How did that happen?
When we were growing up, nowadays they have a medical definition for extra or kids that are extra active. They give them ADHD,
ADHD, yeah.
medication. I believe I was one of those kids because I just had to do something all the time, and I was always competing in football, baseball, basketball. There was something that I always had to be doing something. So, and we didn't have internet or social media back then. So all of our energy when we were growing up as kids was on some kind of playing field, participating in sports.
Right. So, who were some of your biggest influences? Who or what were some of the things that influenced you the most as a kid?
Muhammad Ali, being the world champion boxer he was, and me being a kid, and him coming to visit and play with us in the street, that first of all impressed us. Here's this bigger than life athlete, and we're out in the
He was
street.
Cassius Clay.
This
then.
Cassius Clay
Yeah,
then,
yeah.
and so we're playing with him, and like I said, Reggie Smith and some of the other professional athletes,
Marcus Allen,
and
I
Marcus
believe.
Allen,
Yeah.
and the different ones.
That's quite a pickup game you got there. So.
Yeah, you get to see different people, and you get to perform at a different level. So when you do go and participate on a team, you're better than you thought you were.
Right. If those guys are who you have in your pickup game,
Exactly.
I imagine if you didn't get better, you didn't get to play.
You didn't get to play.
Yeah. So, how did you first get involved in track and field, and what inspired you to choose that sport as opposed to football, basketball, baseball?
Initially, track and field, 68 Olympics. When I watched the 68 Olympics, there was one significant event that happened. Tommy Smith and John Carlos. Tommy Smith won the 200 meters, and he stood on the podium and raised his fist up in protest. And there was a whole bunch of hoopla around it, but the one thing that impressed me was that he won that particular race as an individual.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I seen as something that I wanted to do. If I'm gonna be on a podium, I want to be there as an individual. In team sports, it's fun to go as a team, but when you can achieve that goal as an individual, that's saying a lot.
Right. So as you begin to move into this track and field world, when did it dawn on you? When did the light come on and you looked in the mirror and said, I'm pretty good at this?
Well, it happened in 1977. It was a year after Edwin Moses won the 76 Olympics in Montreal.
Mm-hmm.
He came to Mount Sac Relays. Myself was a sophomore. And I was put in that race. I was slated in lane 1. And I remember my dad coming home, and they had showed the lineup in the newspaper what athletes were going to participate in this race with Edwin Moses. And I happened to be in lane 1, and my dad said to me, he said, I should feel blessed that I had the opportunity to participate in the race, and that whatever I do, he'd be proud of me.
Right.
And I told him I was going to win that race. And he said, well, whatever you do, I'm going to be proud of you. And so when I went and we lined up on the starting gate to run that race, I took him to the finish line. And that was a photo finish race that it took them about an hour or so to come back to tell us who won the race.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested today to see that photo because it took forever for them to come announce who won the race. So for them to take that long, the Olympic champion and some unknown hurdler out of nowhere, that was when I knew that I had touched the threshold.
And when I came to visit you at your home, you showed me that picture.
Yes.
And I can see why it took so long for them to make it because if you look at it one way, it looks like you hit the tape first.
Yeah.
And then if you look at it another way, who knows? But that was, I can imagine if you're running neck and neck with Edmund Moses, I guess if you would realize I'm pretty good.
It would be nice to get an opportunity to see that race, because it was a controversial finish.
Mm-hmm.
But they never ever in history mentioned that Edwin was taken to a photo finish. They always said he was undefeated.
Right.
They never mentioned that race.
Where did you get that picture?
There was some photographer that took it that was at the race,
Right.
And so it's not a secret. There's other people that have copies of that.
Right.
So I would be interested to know what the end result of that was.
So as you began to move toward college, you went to when you began to know that you were going to run track in college. What did it take for you mentally and physically to get prepared to compete at that level? What did you have to do?
I love competition. I mean, just competing against you playing checkers or cards, anything that's a game, I'm in it to win it. And so for me, track and field, the drive to go out and train harder than anyone else. It just to know that I was putting in the work,
Mm-hmm.
because I got to train along my peers and watch different ones train, and I know my work ethic, the way I train. It's I work harder, and so when you work harder, when you go to a race, my whole intent is to punish the person that's standing there next to me, not to just be a part of that or be a participant, but be someone that makes them pay for wanting to compete or to line up with you.
Now, I'm certainly no runner on your level, but I know that when I have ran before, my guess is what you say when you mean punish somebody is when you're running hard, it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it like your breathing has to be there, your legs have to be there, and if you're making the other person push, and it becomes a challenge of who can endure and who's going to quit first.
Battle of the fittest.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's what it's all about with training. Training is something that people, when you go into training, the physical part of getting prepared for the extra the work you're going to do,
Mm-hmm.
it involves a lot of stretching.
Right.
And a lot of times people negate that part. I was very good at that phase of it, or that aspect of it, which helped me in my performances. So I think that's going to be the secret that's going to help me now.
Right. Now, you told me when we met before that you spend almost as much time stretching and getting prepared to train as the actual lifting of the weights or running or whatever exercise you're going to do that day.
I commit 6 hours a day to just stretching, just every day. Every day is stretching, and every minute of not doing anything, I incorporate some kind of stretching routine or exercise with it.
Right. Every day.
Every day. Ever since I've started this journey. Now, when I was working, I wasn't pursuing this dream.
Right.
The whole time I worked. It wasn't until I retired.
Right.
That I started on this dream.
Right.
This mission.
So let me ask you this: who were some of the athletes or coaches who inspired you and helped you develop as an athlete? Did you have a coach, or were you self-trained? How did you do that?
Well, that's where I have to give credit to my ex-wife. My ex-wife, Kim Turner,
Mm-hmm.
was my coach. She was a sprinter also at one particular time, and a world record holder in the indoor
Mm-hmm.
Running. So she had a extensive track career. So she helped me along with she knew about training, and she knows about the routines of exercise and massaging and just doing everything that I needed from a trainer. I got that from her.
Okay. So you're competing in high school, realize you're getting good, and you're transitioning to Cal State LA, where you ran track collegiately. What was that like for you, moving as a high school kid to moving into competing with college international athletes? What was that like?
It was fun. It was challenging. It was intimidating. I remember my first day being. We went on a tour with the coach had a senior member of the track team take us around and show us the gym and where we go get dressed and get ready for track. Anyway, I was looking at some of the records on the board, and I was naming which record that I had planned to break. And it just so happened that one of the senior guys from the track team was behind me, and he heard me, and he just went off on making ridiculing me over it.
Right.
Hey, you see this freshman over here? He's talking about all these records he's going to break, and I mean, he made me feel this big.
Right.
And his name was Larry Rawls, and he was like a top sprinter at one particular point in time in his career when he was in high school. I remembered him,
Mm-hmm.
and so yeah, he made fun of me that particular day. But I everything that I said that I would do, I was able to accomplish in my time there.
Well, when I was doing some research on you before, actually, this is after you and I met at your home and talked. You're in the Cal State LA Hall of Fame, and you still hold most of the track records at that school. Still. And you're
67.
67. And
So
you still hold those records.
now, when you say that, when I'm in the Athletic Hall of Fame at Cal State LA. Look at the Division II Athletic Hall of Fame. I have not made that one. Now they have athletes who didn't even win the national championships. I won it every year except my freshman year. I failed my freshman year because my coach wasn't aware that in the tartan tracks the size of the spikes that we had to wear. It
Right.
rained, so he got spikes that were too short. So I slipped in the final
Mhm.
race, failed, and ended up finishing last. But I vowed that every year that I returned to the national championships that I would win, and I did that every year. And in my senior year, I was the only one in history of the Division II to win both 110-meter hurdles and the 400-meter hurdles in the same national championship event.
So you've had those records for 40 years,
Yeah,
and nobody's broken them.
right,
And training has improved, diet has improved,
right.
and still nobody's broken those records at your school. That's pretty impressive.
And that leads to the person I am today. I never followed sports after I left athletics, and so the reason I didn't is because of that. The times are not that much better. I mean, I give them the credit that they're running some great times, but
Right.
it, I've never was an athlete or a spectator. I was always an athlete. So.
Right. So when you got in college, how did you change? How did you grow as a person, academically, personally, athletically, while you were in college? I mean, how did you change in those years?
Well, the one thing that I learned was when I got to travel to other countries, I realized how we weren't, as Americans,
Mm-hmm.
we weren't accepted by it. I mean, to go over to Hiroshima and to go into towns where the people were, paralyzed from the results of the bomb that was
Right.
run, they didn't like Americans. You go to Italy, Mussolini,
Sure.
they didn't like Americans. You go to Germany, we were in the bars, and we got. When you think about this, I want you to think about this. We have military bases all over Europe,
Mm-hmm.
in other countries. How many countries are in the United States in a military base? From France, Germany. How many bases are set up here?
I'd say 0.
0. And so we're over in all those other countries, and those people over there don't take too highly to you. So you got to learn how to navigate,
Right.
and not be characterized or profiled in a certain light. So
Right.
you go over there and you got to represent.
Now, how old were you when you started competing internationally?
17.
17 years old.
Yeah.
At that time, you wouldn't even been able to drive yet.
I spent my 17th birthday. I was in Rome, Italy.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Because I believe.
No, 17, 75. 75, I was 17, 76.
I
So
believe you had to be 18 at that
18, I was
time to
18.
drive, so you wouldn't have been able to.
Yeah.
You were competing internationally, and you weren't able to drive yet.
Right.
Couldn't buy beer,
Nope.
and you're competing on an international level stage.
Mm-hmm.
How did you handle that as a teenager?
I didn't see a competitor as being a you know, it was, if you got on the track to compete against me, it was just a battle, you know, and so it was always a battle of who can win this
So either
fight.
you could run or you couldn't.
Exactly. That
was it.
I didn't have any fear. Like now, it's like every day in life, you just take your challenges and try to whip your challenges.
Well, athletics is not the only thing in your life that's pretty significant. You know, we talked about growing up in LA and what you've experienced internationally, but your family, very instrumental in the integration of Clinton High School following the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision. Can you talk about your family's involvement in the Clinton 12 and the integrating of Clinton High School and how your family was involved in that process?
My grandmother was very instrumental. Her and some other groups of mothers and fathers that they were sending their kids to school in Austin, East and Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
And my grandmother had 14 children, and she knew, in sending them to Austin East, they had to pay a tuition to go there. And she knew that she wouldn't be able to send them all to school and pay for it. And so that sparked that movement at that particular time. And two of my aunts, Alva J. McSwain and Regina Smith, were a part of that Clinton 12 group. Mm-hmm. And my grandmother, Rosa Parks, and other community leaders took those young people and took them to camps and trained them and schooled them on how to conduct themselves in a nonviolent way, mm-hmm. to be able to pursue going to the school once they got that opportunity, once the ruling was made.
Right.
And so once that happened, as a result, you see what it caused. And so
sure.
The one thing that it did for the family is, the family ended up having to move away, because after that happened, they put a bomb in a trash can, or they bombed the high school, but sure. They had put a bomb on the hill at one point in time, and they were able to find it before it went off.
Right.
And so at that particular point in time is when my grandparents made the decision that they were going to leave Clinton with mm-hmm. the kids and not have to deal with all of that. So
right.
Prior to them leaving there, my mom and dad had left with me. I was conceived here. Mm-hmm. And so I was born in California. And when mom and dad left and got established, that's when the rest of the family moved to California to get away from everything that happened here.
Right.
The sad part to that is, like, moving all of the kids to California to save them from the KKK here. They only went to the city in California, and then just think about taking some kids from the country mm-hmm. and putting them in a city with all of these wild things going on, and they got lost in the shuffle. Yeah. I mean, the city consumed them. So it's not a real success story for the rest of the kids that my grandmother took away right. from here to save, but the legacy of what actually happened had a great impact on this town and, where we are today.
Well, one of the questions I want to ask you, and you just kind of answered it, was, we know, those of us who live in the area know and have read about the impact that the Clinton 12, what happened at Clinton High School with the bombing, the impact it had on our community. But you don't often get a chance to talk to somebody and how that impacted their family personally, yeah. The personal impact of that.
Right. Because
from my aspect, I'm 54, and from my aspect, it's history books, mm-hmm. reading old newspapers. There's the video out about that I've seen in school, even when I was in school, about the Clinton 12. But I really haven't had a chance to sit down and talk to somebody and say, hey, how did this impact you, personally?
It didn't until I found out about it when they were trying to save the museum or when they were trying to save the high school. My parents and our family never talked about any of that stuff. I never knew about it until I was living here.
Really?
They never spoke of any of that stuff ever.
Wow.
And it wasn't until I moved here in 2000, and so the year that they decided to tear down that high school was when I found all of this information out because Marilyn Hayden had came to me and she had all the information about my grandmother and knew all the involvement my grandmother had with that and wanted to reach out to my mom because she knew my mom probably had a lot of the paperwork or the literature and sure enough my mom does have all that information.
Wow. How does that make you feel personally to know how instrumental your family was in a difficult struggle, but a meaningful, significant struggle?
It pretty much makes my life come full circle because it helps me to understand why I'm here. I never understood, as you journey through life, you never understand how you end up in a place. And so I never understood why I was so attracted to Clinton. Nothing I came here in 1968 in sixth grade, fell in love with the place. I just literally fell in love with it. Could not get it out of my mind as I was growing up as a kid. I'm going back to Tennessee. I'm going to live in Tennessee. I spoke that the whole time. Never knew anything about any of the history. Just landed here.
Right.
And then when I landed here, doors just start opening up for me. So it was like God had a purpose for me in life. I started my journey like a salmon. I started my journey somewhere else. I started my journey here, but I was born and conceived somewhere else. But then I came back here to finish my life off. And so that's the way I see my life now is a journey. And so I embrace that, like every day I look at it, it's like I have a purpose. What my grandmother worked so hard for, I'm here to continue that legacy. You can do more by showing people than you can by telling them. So to tell people, hey, I'm gonna go and pursue this, or I'm gonna achieve this record. You can have a goal, but if you keep it internal, nobody will ever know it but you. But if I tell you what I'm going to do, and then I go achieve that goal, then what do? I make you a believer. I'll make you someone who wants to set goals for yourself.
Right. So I have to ask you, I've got to know this for myself. How in the world, like when you lived in LA and then you leave LA and you come and you live in Clinton, Los Angeles is a little bit different than Clinton, Tennessee. As a kid, how did you make that adjustment?
God's country. This is God's country. When you can come somewhere and feel comfortable at home. I mean, everywhere around here, people wave at you. People speak to you. You know where road rage started? Where it came from? It came from the West Coast. That's where it came from. It ain't here.
I told you, I think when we were at your house, I told you my first time that I ever went to LA, I'd never been there. I was like, I don't know, 20 or something. And we went out to see some baseball games that we were going to see. We had tickets to see the Dodgers. We had tickets to see the Padres. And foolish, thinking everything was like here. I got in the car. We were going to go from L.A. to San Diego to see the Padres play at a night game. Well, we got on the road early because we wanted to go down and see batting practice and see the city and all that. I think it took us about 2 hours and 20 minutes to get from L.A. to San Diego. And I think on a normal day at the interstate, it's about a 30-minute drive.
Right.
And we sat there. And when you're paying the kind of money they're paying in L.A. for gas, and you sit there and burn it out on the interstate, I can see why people would be upset.
Rage,
yeah. I mean, we were just like, and I think if I remember correctly, I think there was 8 lanes of traffic on one side and 8 lanes of traffic on and there's 16 lanes of traffic and no one's moving.
Exactly.
We all just sit there.
The express lane on the top. What do you call it? The diamond lane.
Yeah. And I was like, we don't have one of these in Anderson County. It generally doesn't work that way. I can imagine that would be just wild experience for a kid to go from those two extremes.
Yeah.
I don't know how I would have adjusted. So anyway, you moved back home to Clinton, and what was it that attracted you about Food City and going there? How did that become a destination for
Well,
you?
I had a career in the grocery industry. I had worked for Albertsons for like 14 years before I moved here. And when I moved here, my intent was to get involved in home remodeling. Doing, I'm gifted with my hands. And my wife, the first day we were here, we came home and the house was infested with all kinds of bugs and stuff. So she went down to Food City to get some bug spray, and she comes back and says she had a job. And so I stayed around the house working and trying to get the house up to speed for about a month, and then that's when I decided to go looking for work, and that's where I ended up. So.
Well, I know that when you were managing the store, Food City was very involved in the community.
Oh yeah.
I mean, so what made you decide to do that? What made you decide to push for that sort of involvement from where you worked in the community?
Well, that's the kind of company Food City is. They're all about family and the community, and that's what I enjoyed about working with that company, is because coming from the West Coast and having the experience in the grocery industry like I did, I had the opportunity to see a whole bunch of diversified uh, uh, products that I felt would be good to incorporate here. Because when I came here, the store that they built for me here in Clinton was just a little bitty old building, and we barely carried anything. And when I started working there and changed the conditions of the store and was able to fill it up and start making some improvements on the stock levels in the store, that's when the customers started coming. And I was offered earlier on the opportunity to get into a managerial program. I refused it initially because, I had just moved from Vegas, and I was used to lights and streets and concrete, and then at night here, all you got is uh, dry, a whole bunch of mountains and no.
Katydids making noise
Yeah,
outside.
it's when it gets dark here, it goes dark.
Yeah, yeah.
So that took a little getting used to.
Yeah. Well, I have to tell you the story. It's kind of a part two of when I met you at that ball game. So my mother's 84 now, but when I left that game, I was visiting my mom, and I said, "Hey, Mom," I said, I was working this game at Clinton High School, and I said, they had this guy they introduced, and I was going through it. And she said, "Yeah, I know Mr. Turner." She said, "Mr. Turner, he's the manager at Food City." And she said, "He's fantastic because my mom's 5 foot tall." She said, all those things they put on the top shelf? I can't reach any of them, and Mr. Turner always comes and gets those for me." And so she was a big fan. She knew you before I did.
Oh, well.
And she was super impressed. So you kind of talked about the changes that you made at Food City. Talk about the relationships that you built there with your customers, because there's more people than just my mom that have Mr. Turner stories when you were working at Food City.
Well, again, when you think about the Clinton 12 situation, a lot of those people were here during that time, and they knew my grandmother, they knew my family, and so when I came here, I was well received. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be given a store to run in the community in which I live in,
Right.
and so that's unprecedented. And I have to thank Mr. John Jones for Food City. He's the one who put me at the store. And the one thing that I made him promise me is that as long as that store was profitable, that I would get to run that store. And so I got to run that store for 19 years.
Right.
So
That's fantastic. So we've got you up through Food City, and you're retired now. But the goals for you, they're not over. And you've got something that you're shooting for now in, I think, 2028. Can you talk about that a little bit?
2028 Senior Olympics. You know, in my career as a store manager, and like I said, I've been with Food City for 25 years, and in 25 years, I seen a lot of my customers that would come in, and as they aged, their kids move on and go on into their own lives, and those customers will continue coming to shop in the store. And then there were times that they would come in and they would be disoriented. So as they aged, they would get to the point where they'd have Alzheimer's or some type of medical condition where they would be disoriented or lose concept of how much time they spend in the store.
Mm-hmm.
And so we would end up on a couple of occasions calling the law enforcement or calling to try to find someone to come get them and find out that their kids are in another state. They're at home on their own and
Right.
suffering from whatever ailment they might have. And I always said to myself, if my parents ever fell on those type of situations and that type of situation, I would give up my career and go take care of them. And that's basically what I did. So in doing so, I got an opportunity to spend the last 5 months of my dad's life with him. And in doing that, it gave me an opportunity to realize that watching him lose his life, you know, because he had a leaky heart valve.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that he didn't want to do is have an intrusive surgery where they go in to fix it and crack his chest open.
Right.
He's 89 years old, and he knew he wouldn't be able to rehabilitate himself after that. And I made a conscientious decision at that particular time to say, I'm not going to let my kids see me suffer that way, because it was hard to watch him go through that. But it was at such a late, you know, it's 89 years old. They found it when he was in his mid 80s, but you know, it was beyond the point of him doing something to fix it.
Right.
So that's when I made a decision. The one thing you say to yourself, a lot of times you'll hear people talking and saying, if I had a chance to go back and do this over again,
Mm-hmm.
how would I do it?
Right.
Guess what? I get a chance to go do it over again. So I know how I'm going to do it. I'm going to be smart. I'm going to take care of my body. I'm going to go see my cardiologist. I'm going to see my regular practicing doctor to make sure that I have everything in line to do what I'm setting myself up to tackle.
Right.
And then I'm going to go for it because I feel good enough to tackle that. A lot of times, like I said, you don't want to tell people what you're going to do. You got to show them.
Right.
And so I want to show people what you can do with your life if you make it, you commit yourself to it. Not only that, it's like, who's to say what the limitations of one's body or what you can do or what you can accomplish? Who's can say what you can achieve? So if you set limitations, you'll never go beyond the scope of what people think is normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to go beyond the scope of normalness and set a new precedent.
So where are the Senior Olympics in 2028?
It's in Los Angeles, and the reason I chose
How about
Los Angeles,
that?
I chose Los Angeles because in 1984, I had one of the fastest times in the world in the 200 meters. I was one of the favorite hurdles to be on that particular team, and I trained so hard that I ended up with a stress fracture. And so one of the downsides to athletics or any major competition, you know, on that one particular given day, you have to be at your best.
Right.
And you can do things leading up to that that'll take you off of your A game. And you might not be able to perform at the level that you would love to perform at, but you miss that window. So for me now, I have to make the right choices and getting in shape first and getting healthy and making sure everything is right. But at this point, the way I feel, I'm on track to achieve the goal that I have set for myself.
That's fantastic. So one thing that there's still some venues, some international venues where you still hold the track record, correct?
Yes.
What do you remember which ones that, and this is 40 years ago and you still hold the track record?
There's so many, you know what, my son and my daughter, they go and they find those events. Sometimes I have customers that'll come show me, and I didn't realize I still had those records still standing. So, you know, I'd like to set a record for a 67-year-old me in the track and field world. You know, it's like you said, How many people you know have their own Wikipedia page?
I did. When I Googled you, it popped up, weeks ago, and I was like, wow, Sam's got his own. He's got his own Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and when I was doing some research on you, I was like, when when you are contemporaries with, and you're on the same track with Edwin Moses and Ronaldo Nehemiah,
Mm-hmm.
and I mean, I remember those guys,
Yeah.
and certainly with the Olympics and some of the international competition, and I mean, you have pictures at your house when it's like, hey, there's Edwin Moses, and there's Ronaldo Nehemiah, and there's Sam Turner and I'm standing in his house on the same track,
Yeah.
and in some of those races, your times were better than theirs.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's got to be wild to realize that you were at that level.
Well, for me, the difference for me as an athlete and the other athletes, I always competed outside of the box. World class athletes have a tendency to pick and choose meets to keep their rankings at a certain standard. I was one of those athletes who would travel all over the world, anywhere in any little cubbyhole to compete in a little track meet if they had a track like in the Clinton High School, how they got that little thing. They would have meets in little towns like that for whatever hometown hero that they had
Mm-hmm.
that was competing, and they couldn't get a lot of the international athletes to come to meets like that. Well, I would always go, like Finland and all the little towns in Italy or Finland, or I mean, I would travel outside of the box just to give the people an opportunity to see me compete against
Right.
their fellow countrymen.
So as you reflect back on your life thus far, all the successes you've achieved, and what are some things that you would share with others who are striving for their own goals and challenges? I mean, you've accomplished so much. What have you learned that you would share with other folks that may be having their own challenges? Maybe not at an international elite competition level, but whatever their challenges are. What are some of the things that you learned that you could share with
Be
folks?
selfish in your commitment. When you commit to something, you know, not all of the times can you go full board to like say for training. You say I'm gonna train every single day. Well, not every day you can go 100%. If you can train and you can go 25%, you're training. 25% you gave something.
Right.
So give something. If you put things off to say that I'm gonna do it on another day when you have a goal that you're trying to achieve, that's when you won't achieve your goal. Every day put something into it. You ain't gonna feel 100% every day. You ain't gonna feel like it's like you can go to work every day. You don't feel like teaching every day.
Right.
But you got to think of the purpose. What you're there for. It's your job to get those students through another day. So you got to get on your game.
Right.
So that's not a choice. It's just an obligation that you have because of something that you're committed to. So
My dad, it's funny you say that. My dad used to tell me all the time. I remember he used to say, if you only worked on the days you felt like working, you'll never accomplish anything.
exactly.
Because there's going to be plenty of days you don't feel it,
Hmm.
but you do it anyways because you're committed.
Exactly.
Um, so you're on the same page with my dad on that. So that,
Yeah.
that I'm going to take that as true. Okay, here's my final question for you. Of all the many things you've accomplished in your life, I mean, you international athlete, you're in your school's Hall of Fame. You hold world records for. You ran a successful store in your town for 2 decades. What are what are you most proud of that you've achieved so far? What are the things that make you proudest?
That during the time I had to run that store, all of the people and all the experiences that I were able, all of the friendships. My family is Clinton. This town is my this is my everything. Food City, Clinton, the people in Clinton. That's what all of that has done for me. Is that's my payoff is how I've been received.
Mm-hmm.
So it just makes me want to continue to do more for the town that's given me so much love.
You know, I'm so impressed to hear you say that relationships.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what you're doing, running a school, attending a church, being part of a community. It's about relationships.
Yes.
I mean, that's the secret sauce.
Right.
And if you can't get that, it doesn't matter what the structure is and what else you've got going on. If you don't have those relationships, it's tough to be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you do have those quality relationships, a lot of times you can overcome other things.
Right.
But you can't if you don't have that. Sam, thank you so much for coming in and doing this. I've enjoyed meeting you. You and your wife were so gracious to me. When we first spoke on the phone, you invited me over to your house, and we walked around, and you showed me some of your memorabilia and scrapbooks, and that was really neat. And you guys have been super kind, and I'm so very glad that you came in to do the show. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
And best of luck in 2028.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I can get you a ticket and have you sitting there.
There you go.
Yeah.
Fly me out to L.A. That'd
There
be
you
great.
go.
But you'll have to drive. I don't want to get on those roads anymore.
You won't have to. I have a chauffeur.
There you go. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
All right.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is episode 3. We have our guest for April already set up, but I'm not going to tell you today. It's going to be a surprise. But tune in April for episode 4 of ACTV Storytellers.